All right. Looks like everybody's joining. We're going to wait a couple of seconds to go ahead and get started. Okay. All right. So I want to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us on a Tuesday night. We are really excited to be launching Hyperscore tonight, and we have some very special guests with us. So I would like to turn it over to Jim to say a couple of words, and then we'll get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Frankel. I'm the founder and director of Music First, and I'm absolutely delighted to be partnering with Hyperscore and all the folks there, Todd Mack, June Kaneshita, CC, everybody, and Peter, all the crew to bring this product to the web and to students around the world. I first met Todd Mack about a little over 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago at the MIT Media Lab. Learned of his work as a composer, but also as a kind of creator, inventor, innovator in the music education and creation space. And I am a huge fan of the Hyperscore world, the way we can get kids of all abilities, all knowledge levels, all experience levels creating. In my opinion, there's no better use of music education or no better avenue for kids than to have them create and express themselves. It gives them a sense of agency, a sense of belonging. And I've spent my entire career trying to get kids to be using technology to create music. It's what got me inspired. It's why I'm here tonight. So I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm really I'm looking at the Hollywood squares on the Zoom and just thrilled with everyone who's here this evening. I'm not going to speak much longer. I'm going to get right to the point and let you in on why we at Music First are so excited to bring Hyperscore to you. So I'll be quiet now and turn it back over to Rachel Nicastro, who's our Director of Marketing at Music First. Rachel, take it away.
All right. I want to make sure that everybody can see my screen. Good. Okay. So my name is Rachel Nicastro. I am the Director of Marketing here at Music First. I'm joined today by my colleagues Jim Frankel, that you just met, as well as Natalia Betrago, who's the Content Marketing and Event Manager for Music First as well. The Hyperscore team is here tonight as well. We've got Todd Mack, who is the co-founder and board chair at Hyperscore, and he is a world-class musician, composer, educator, and inventor, and is the brilliant mind behind Hyperscore. He's a professor of music and media at the MIT Media Lab and the director of the lab's Hyper Instruments and Opera of the Future groups. Not only is he renowned for his innovative compositions, which are beautiful, but he's also a leader in tech innovations for music. So I am thrilled to have him here tonight. We also have June Kaneshita, who's the executive director of Hyperscore. She is the co-founder and executive director of New Harmony Line, which is the nonprofit organization that's behind the development of Hyperscore with the mission of promoting self-expression and creativity through music composition. We've also got Peter Torpe, who's with us tonight. He's the CTO, for New Harmony Line, and he took that position back in 2019 to help redevelop Hyperscore for the web and expand its functionality specifically for music education. He's been working with Todd on projects involving Hyperscore for almost 2 decades, so he is a wealth of information. We've also got Cecilia C.C. Raudebush. She is the Director of Education for Hyperscore, and she's a veteran music educator with over 30 years of experience teaching both general and adaptive music at the elementary and secondary music levels. She specialized in behavior disorders when she was studying music education and music therapy. And she writes content including lesson plans for Hyperscore and can really speak to how to use this software with your students. And last but not least, we have Dr. Kevin Jennings. Kevin is a musician and a music educator. He's worked extensively with teachers in pre and post service, and he has delivered multiple Hyperscore workshops to teachers and to kids all over the world. He's currently acting in an advisory capacity for Hyperscore for their pedagogy. So I will go ahead and turn this over to June, and she will take it from here.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So as Rachel said, I am the Executive Director of New Harmony Line. And I've had the privilege of observing this amazing software in action with kids around the world in projects, collaborations with symphony orchestras, whole cities, and so on, over the past more than a dozen years. And I was so amazed and impressed by just how much people flourished. Teachers and kids loved this program, and they produced amazing, expressive, highly personal music from it. And I was convinced this really has to get out to a broader audience and to educators everywhere, because we really believe it has the potential to transform how kids understand music, engage with music, and how they can express themselves through music. And I love this quote from a young man at a middle school in New York State, who is the kind of stakeholder we most care about. And he said, "It's the single coolest thing to happen to music ever." And we completely agree with that. So I want to now move on to the founder of Hyperscore technology to tell you about the origins and the inspiration behind the technology. This is Todd Mack.
Thanks so much, June. And thank you, Jim and Rachel, for that terrific introduction. And actually, I think Jim said it so beautifully that creating music is just incredibly special. It's incredibly special because it develops a sense of agency for anybody who makes their own music, and a sense of optimism and possibility and imagination. And there's nothing like it. And I got the bug about how special music creativity was at a very early age. I'm not sure I'm in this picture, but my mother is. So that woman with her arms like that is my mom. And she was a great music pedagogue, fantastic piano teacher, but she believed from the very start of her teaching that it was equally important, of course, to teach the rigor of repertoire and technique on the piano, but it was equally important to have kids learn to make their own music. And so I'm the oldest of 3 kids. I was sort of her guinea pig in all of this, and we'd have our lessons, and then she'd send us out through the house to find objects and to come back and to hear the sound of each object, to hear the combinations, to give them adjectives for what they felt like, and then to make stories with these objects. And finally, the task for going home was to make a picture of the story we'd made. And she'd say, make a picture so when we come back next week, we can look at the picture, remember what we did, and try it again. And in that little bit of time, we all learned, I know I certainly learned, that music is not only something that's on printed pages, it's not only a wealth of technique that you need to learn, but it's a creative, active engagement that allows everybody not only to express themselves, but also to develop their own system, to share music, and to pull in the world around you to express it in sound. And so ever since that time, I've believed that one of my missions, besides writing my own music, is to bring this joy and possibility of creating music to as many people as possible. So that's how we started Hyperscore. If you go to the next slide, So, you know, these days, I'm the one who has my arms up like that. I spend a fair amount of my time with young people really around the world, using Hyperscore and other similar activities to make pieces that are important to each individual, to make pieces together. June quickly mentioned the idea of city symphonies. One thing that we do is to go into a city and invite everybody in the city of all ages to collaborate together to make sonic portraits of that city. Hyperscore is a core element of that project. In fact, I'm about to go to Bilbao, Spain, to start a project, a 2-year project, where the whole city will come together to make a big symphony about what it means to be a city that supports well-being and health for everybody in the community. If we go to the last slide, or the next slide, I just say that, as Jim mentioned, and Rachel as well, I work at the MIT Media Lab, which itself is a very special environment for cultivating creativity. It cultivates creativity for the researchers and faculty who work there, for our graduate students, for undergrads, and also develops all kinds of tools for unleashing creativity in young people, especially in kids around the world. And along with the development of Hyperscore and New Harmony Line, there's a strong connection that continues with the MIT Media Lab. So as new developments come online, they will little by little become part of the Hyperscore package. That crazy thing you see in the bottom quadrant with the pink is actually a PhD project that one of my star students, Nicole Rillier, is defending this Friday. And this is an environment that allows people to communicate with the wind pulled in from around the world. So you never know what's going to come out of our lab. It will end up in Hyperscore in one form or another. And we're just thrilled that there's a possibility now through Music First to bring Hyperscore to as wide an audience as possible and to as many young people as possible around the country. Thanks for being here, and I'll turn the word back to June to go into some detail about how it works.
Thanks, Todd, so much. So it won't be me telling you about how it works. It's going to be Peter Torpe, our Chief Technology Officer. Peter was a PhD student in Todd's lab, and he got to MIT because of Hyperscore, because as a young kid, he came across the old version that ran in Windows, was so entranced by it. And maybe it's another great example of the transformative power of Hyperscore. He found himself at MIT, and now he's the brains behind redeveloping it for the web. So Peter, if you can show people what it does.
Yeah. So the 3 basic approaches to composing with Hyperscore. It's placing notes, drawing pitch, and shaping harmony. And I'll show you in Hyperscore how that works. If I could get the screen sharing, I can do a live demo here.
Yeah, you're a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. So hopefully you see our Hyperscore. Once you sign up for a Hyperscore account, or you get a Hyperscore account as a student in a Hyperscore classroom, it's very simple to begin composing. I just have to click on this new score button on my scores page, and Hyperscore launches right in my browser. And as you can see, it's a graphical interface that's hopefully intuitive for anyone of any age to start using. There are 3 types of windows in Hyperscore, which is how you actually interact musically with the program. And I'll start by creating what we call a melody window. I can make this window as long as I want, but I'll just start with this 4-beat bar here. And into that window, I can place a few notes and change the duration and play it back. So I'll start with a sequence of 5 notes, and each of these windows has a color associated with it, and that acts as a label for that sequence of notes. So I can come into a second type of window here called a sketch window, and this is where I'm actually going to start drawing my piece of music. So with the pen tool, draw tool, and that purple color that represents that sequence of notes, I can just start by drawing a line through the middle of the window. And as you might expect, Hyperscore is going to repeat that 5-note sequence over and over again. I can, of course, take that line, move it up, moves it up in pitch, down. But what's really interesting in Hyperscore is that I don't just have to draw straight lines. I can think about, oh, let's say I wanted melodic line to come in right about here, and then it's going to go low in pitch and then come back up towards the middle near the end. And if I play that, so we can hear that Hyperscore is taking that 5-note motif that I have and continuously transposing it to fit the contour of the line. So I don't need to be thinking about individual notes right now. I can start thinking about what is the larger scale structure of the piece of music that I want to create. So I've got this one contour running through here, and let's say I want another part that starts a bar later and comes in and then goes up really high, comes down just a little bit before the end. And maybe for good measure, I want a bass line, so I can create another melody window here, and I'll make this one actually 2 bars long and put some notes into it. And then with that orange color, I can draw my bass line in right along the bottom there. So now I can also take each of these and assign an instrument to them so that I can hear them better, orchestrate my piece. Strings, and then for the bass line, let's say pitch power string. Okay, Hyperscore is doing exactly what I told it to do. The different parts, the different instruments are following the contours that I drew. But maybe I want something that's a little less dissonant. Hyperscore can help me out. If I come over to the harmony mode on the left side of the sketch window here and click classical harmony, Hyperscore has some rules of Western harmony built into it, and it's going to go through what I drew and adjust the notes by a half step or so while still keeping these contours, these high level contours, and the individual melodic fragments in mind. So now it's going to adjust the notes to fit a particular scale or key. Liking how that sounds, but maybe it's still a little repetitive. With the harmony enabled, though, I can use this gray line that runs through the middle of every sketch window called the harmony line to actually sculpt and shape the harmonic progression of the piece that I'm creating. So I can think about, oh, what is the journey I'm taking the listener on? What is the story I'm trying to tell? Maybe right here where this green region is, I'm going up the slope. I want to increase in harmonic tension. It's going to plateau and then resolve in the blue region. And then maybe right before the end, we'll do something different. We'll put a spike in, and that creates that yellow region, which is going to be a key change. So that adds certainly some interest. And then I said in the beginning that there were 3 types of windows. And the third type of window that I haven't shown yet is the percussion window. And this is actually a great way of getting started with perhaps younger kids, or if you want to talk about rhythm before you get into melody and pitch. You can open up one of these percussion windows, and I can just drop some notes in here that are going to create drum beats. This, and each track in this window represents a different percussion, unpitched percussion instrument. And we'll play that back. Okay. So I like that. And then this is yellow. So with that yellow color, I can just add that into my piece here. So I'll draw a line, and then maybe right here where that blue region starts, I'll take a break from the drums and then bring them back in right for that modulation to the end. So one more time. So that's really the basics of Hyperscore. Of course, there's a lot more you can do. You can spend a lot more time creating more windows. Obviously, composing a whole piece, a symphony in 2 minutes, it doesn't really work, but you can spend a lot of time really developing how to shape a piece, how to do storytelling, how to think about a beginning, a middle, and an end for your piece. And of course, once it's all done, coming up with a good name for your piece. This is not such a good name, but I think it's a good introduction to Hyperscore. I'll name that piece and click right here to go back to my scores and save it to the cloud. And there it is. Jumping back to slides just quickly. Once you have as a school educator administering Hyperscore, you have access to add educators to your school's account for Hyperscore, and those educators can then go create Hyperscore classrooms or groups, and they can organize each of their classes in a separate group and add students to that class as composers. As individual students submit their Hyperscore work, that goes into a dashboard where you as an educator can view what each student has done. You can also create template projects and share that with students as part of perhaps assignments or inspiration. And from a student perspective, they have their personal Hyperscore account that they can go into a profile for each class, Hyperscore classroom that they're in, and create work and share that, submit that to their teacher. And that's a quick look at how Hyperscore works.
You're muted, June.
Sorry about that. Yes, I don't know if Peter mentioned, there is a collaboration tool in the dashboard where each composer can opt to share and allow their piece to be remixed. So then kids can start trading pieces and embellishing them and so on. So that's really fun. So our next speaker is Cece Raudebusch, our Director of Education.
Well, I'm sure I can tell you after that little speech from Peter that you can see exactly why I passionately taught Hyperscore for 18 years at the junior high level. I was one of the first pilot teachers. I met Todd in, yes, it was probably 2007 when he presented at the University of Iowa. And I said to myself, this is the missing link. And I went right back to my junior high and I started teaching Hyperscore the next week. I had a student who won a contest and Todd had it played at our local auditorium and I was hooked. And I taught for 18 years. So I could tell you that I had thousands of kids go through my music technology program, my Rock Band 101 class, and my Flex Music class, and they all had the opportunity to write music with Hyperscore. So I'm 100% in, and I know you get an opportunity to try it with students, and you'll understand as well. I retired in June of 2021, and I had been in contact with Peter in June trying to get Hyperscore on the web during COVID, and it wasn't available. And so through a few conversations, we decided that perhaps maybe I could come on board as a director of education. So I'm absolutely thrilled to refresh my career after retiring from teaching and working with June and Peter. What an honor to meet all these people who've done such a wonderful job of creating this. As the director of education, I run the social media, and then I am also writing the curriculum and currently working on the National Core Arts Standards. We're using the modules that I used in junior high, but of course I've improved them dramatically as Peter has added new things to the new tools to the program and software. I ran a beta test with a number of teachers all across the United States, as well as Portugal, Greece, and Canada. And with their suggestions, we implemented a lot of their feedback, and we're still getting pieces turned in. I got some things just recently from Portugal, and that's a very exciting thing to know that people all over the world are using Hyperscore right now. I can't wait to see how that continues. One of my roles is also to present about Hyperscore, to train educators, and of course to support you. If you decide to use this program, I come with the program. I'm here to answer your questions, to help you decide how to implement it in your classroom. If you have students with special needs, I think that you'll find that it's very usable. I just found out right before we got on that I had requested Peter to have a locking tool on the screen, so that if you're working with a student with special needs and they've done something wonderful and you wanted to lock it so they didn't do anything else, he just implemented that for me. I just found out. And what a wonderful thing. I recently did a study with third graders and they were enchanted. I only got to do 5 sessions with them. I could have done 15. It was a wonderful opportunity to work with a classroom teacher and let her see what Hyperscore was able to do with a 3rd grade class. I'm writing K through 12 curriculum, so you can't tell me that there's not anybody that can compose with this program. Everyone with access to a device and the internet can write music with this program. I think that I can't thank enough the people who created it from the beginning. And I see us as an ever evolving company of creative leaders and then also creative teachers. And I hope you'll join my Facebook community. And I hope you'll look at my social media. I hope you'll ask me questions about curriculum and give me ideas of things you'd like to see. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Great, thank you so much. And I think we have a few screenshots here of what the National Core Art Standard guide looks like. That's for a particular teaching unit. And if you can advance a slide, we also have a page on our website with a lot of resources that will help you get in step by step and how to use the different tools in Hyperscore. So we have that kind of support as well. And if you go to the next slide, that's just a screenshot of our Facebook group, Teaching Hyperscore. Let's discuss. We think that Hyperscore will unlock creativity, not just in the students, but in the teachers. You will be able to conceive of things that you did not think were possible with your kids before. And we want you to be there sharing it, learning from each other. Thanks so much. So our next speaker is Dr. Kevin Jennings, who was part of the original Hyperscore team. He did his doctoral work looking at the pedagogical aspects of Hyperscore and what makes it so unique. So Kevin.
June, thank you. Hi, everyone. As June said, my name is Kevin Jennings, and I'm coming to you from Dublin, Ireland, where it's coming up to midnight. So I'll be going to bed while you're all going to your dinner. So as June said, my background was initially as a high school music teacher and later as an academic, and I worked very closely with Todd and his team over many years on Hyperscore and related projects. Cece's already talked a little bit about how we can use Hyperscore in the context of ongoing programs, how we integrate it with structured approaches to curriculum, how it can be used to support national standards. So maybe I'll just say a few words more generally and kind of philosophically about some of the things we think about the pedagogical approach. Any of us who've worked with Hyperscore over any period of time, we've had the experience of starting workshops with kids, and you show them the software and they goof around a bit and they draw smiley faces and see what that sounds like and do all that kind of stuff. And then they started, I see Cece's nodding there because we've all seen that. But then they start into a more meaningful set of activities in terms of composing. And we've all had a conversation that goes something like, a child will start one of those motive windows, that the melody window that Peter showed us, and they'll say, what do I do? And you'll say, well, maybe try putting a note, and they put a note. And then you say, well, okay, do you like your note? And they'll say, I don't know. And you might say, well, how many ways could your note be different? And we'll experiment. And maybe the note could be, we could put it up here, we could put it down here, we could make it longer, we could make it shorter, we could change the instrumentation. And so eventually we'll settle on a note. And then you might say, well, why don't we make a second note? And now the thing gets more complicated and interesting, because we now have to put a second note. Well, does it go higher than the first note? Does it go lower than the first note? Is it longer than the first note? Is it shorter than the first note? And pretty quickly, we get into all kinds of complexity just by experimenting in this melody window. And then we might make a second motive, as you saw Peter do, and we'd say, well, does this one, could we make one that goes with the first one? And then you're into a really interesting conversation about, well, what does goes with mean? Does it mean the same as? Does it mean different from? Does it mean complementary to? Does it mean lines up with? It could mean any number of things. And you tease these things out in conversation with the child. And so the first point I've made in the slide here is this notion of inverting the pedagogy. So rather than teaching the rudiments and then seeking to use them to make a piece of music, we discovered the rudiments in the course of conversations while we're co-creating the music, or while the child is creating the music. And so even in the little example I gave, we've talked about pitch, we've talked about timbre, we've talked about interval, we've talked about melodic contour, we've maybe talked about note values, we've talked about rhythmic speed. You know, kids will say it's a fast motive, and what they mean is there are lots of notes in it, not necessarily the tempo. And pretty quickly then in the window where you draw, you'll get into conversations about counterpoint and harmony and texture and form, but you don't call those things those words at the outset. You put those labels on afterwards, after the concept has been internalized and used in practice. And that's one of the lovely things about Hyperscore, is that we turn the pedagogy upside down, and we derive these things from the act of composing, which is very interesting. Another piece that's always struck me about Hyperscore is this notion of notation. And as we all know, music is a complex domain, and music notation, standard music notation, is of necessity very complicated. But for a kid who's trying to access music through notation, that throws up a whole bunch of issues. You can end up in this chicken and egg situation where, you know, I need to learn notation in order to access the musical concept, but in order to be able to understand what the note symbol represents, I need to understand the concept in the first place. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Traditional notation is not intuitive. There's no particular reason to suppose that a circle with a line on it produces a sound that's twice as long as a circle that's been colored in with a line on it. Whereas if you look in Hyperscore, we make a thing that's this long, we make a thing that's this long, and you can see the relationships very clearly. And there's also this piece about trying to explore extended formats and learn about musical structures. In order to do that, you need to be able to have a record of the thing that you can stand back from and look at and think about and manipulate. So I think that's another key issue, another key aspect of Hyperscore, is that it sort of bypasses the notation issue. It gives us something that's intuitive, manipulable, and transparent to the child. So it can be used to access concepts that they would struggle to access through other methodologies. A third thing that has always really appealed to me about the software and the way we teach with it is the materials are drawn from the child. You can go to a lesson with the child and say, today we're going to learn about quarter notes and eighth notes, and we're going to do an activity where we're going to make a motive with quarter notes and a motive with eighth notes, and then we're going to see how they line up. That's entirely valid, and it's a completely good thing to do. But you can also turn that on its head and turn up with nothing. And say, today we're going to make a piece of music. And then you start a conversation with the child using the materials that are drawn from the child. And the conversation you have with every kid is different. Every kid's journey is unique. You've got 10 kids in the room, they all learn different things, and that's okay. And it's all based on their personal experience of composing. And your pedagogical approach will flex and be personalized. And predominantly, a lot of the pedagogy is simply about trying to ask the right question. You know, why did you do that? How would you make that longer, shorter, better, louder, quieter? What might go with that? How would you change that? Finding the right question to ask is a huge part of this. There's a cliche that's used in talking about technology and education, and I'm sure you've all heard it, about this idea of being a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a sage on the stage. You know things that the kids don't know, and it's your job to tell them those things sometimes. But what this process does is it takes you off the stage and puts you beside the kid, and you become a co-conspirator and a guide and a mentor and a companion and a person who asks interesting questions. It really changes the relationship you have with the kids. And I find that, I mean, in terms of the last point, it's incredibly freeing. I've always found teaching with Hyperscore to be one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. It just frees you from the constraints you have as a teacher in a classroom, puts you on the kids' level. The conversations you have with the kids they're inherently musical conversations. They're about musical expression. There's a real partnership with the kids. There's a connection to them. I use the word co-creator. You become this co-conspirator, you know, in creating this thing. And you have this wonderful chance to be there and see the light go on, which is why we all got into teaching in the first place, right? and you see the sense of ownership that the kids have and the pride that they have in what they create. They want to go home and show it to their folks and, look at each other's pieces and share them. And so it can be an enormously rewarding experience to teach like that. It's a very different way of teaching. It's a very different headspace to occupy when you go in to teach kids, but it's incredibly creative and rewarding. I've certainly found it to be so, and I hope you all will adapt the software and find the same thing. So I hope you'll be able to incorporate it in your pedagogy and find your way to be the teacher that you are through the medium of this. So I think that's all I have to say. I'm going to hand it over to Anne next, I believe.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was tremendous. And now I'm so pleased to introduce a special guest, Anne Dugan, who's the Director of Community Partnership with an extraordinary musical organization called Sister Cities Girl Choir. And she can tell you more about that and why she's so excited about Hyperscore and our whole approach to putting composing as a central experience in kids' music.
Oh, thanks so much, June. I feel like I'm going to echo a lot of what Kevin just shared. Kevin, as you were sharing, I was just getting so fired up too. So I work with Sister Cities Girl Choir, and we are a girl empowerment choir academy, El Sistema inspired in Philadelphia, Camden, New Jersey, and Baltimore, Maryland. And while I have not yet used Hyperscore with our composing, it's something that we're gearing up for and getting ready to do. I am so excited about the potential. First of all, I have to say I love this picture right here. This is one of our first powerful experiences that our singers had with composition. We were lucky to partner with Todd Mack when he was commissioned by the Philadelphia Orchestra to write what became Philadelphia Voices. And he came in and worked with our girls over a year's time. And it was the first time that we just are finishing our 10th season. It's the first time that really watched our choir kids have the experience of their ideas, their musical ideas, their voices, their thoughts be put to life in a piece of music. And this is on the day that we performed at Carnegie Hall, that piece of music. So it was a really thrilling experience. And after that experience, and witnessing how they were affected by this, we really upped our own commitment to nurturing kids' voices. And we set a strategic goal in 2018 to have half of our rep each season be original works by the Sister Cities Girl Choir family. So our singers, our teaching artists, and our families. And this is the only time this sentence will probably ever come out of my mouth, but thanks to the pandemic. And the fact that we had to be in virtual choir here for the last 2 years, we found that this was a great platform for collaborative songwriting. And it was a great tool to connect to our students during this time and to really stay aware of them and what they were going through. And I will say a big piece of collaborative songwriting and songwriting with kids, anyway, composing, is our own willingness as the adults in the space to jump in and really help facilitate. And like Kevin just shared, sort of co-create the work with our singers. And that's what we did. And last year we met that goal 3 years early. So we wrote 10 new original works last season, and all of our singers took part in composing at least one, and some of them up to 5 and 6 songs in the season. And just to echo what everyone's saying and what hopefully you're experiencing, is that composing with kids is such powerful work. And what I love about Hyperscore, right, up until now, we've used tracks that were written, beat tracks that we purchase online, that kind of a thing. What I love about Hyperscore is it would sort of complete the composition experience. It gives students a way to kind of access their creativity and composition, like Kevin said again, without the restraints of traditional notation or the tyranny. It's my favorite, because it's so immediate, right? Something intuitive like that means right away I can have an idea and I can see it come to life. And what I have found is that when you're composing with kids and they have that immediate, easy access to expressing themselves, their thoughts and their ideas, and they have this platform, your engagement with them increases, their engagement, your relationship grows. And that's so, so important. So this season, I'm just in the process of finishing up in our 10th season, working on 6 original songs with 5 of our choirs. And, just as an example of what you can do with composition with kids, we're writing songs about bringing a friend to the zoo and my cat too. The power of paying it forward with a circle of kindness. One of my middle school choirs is writing a song that came out of conversations around their very deep and conflicted experiences around the pandemic and wearing masks and what that did to their relationships. And so up until now, I've composed with kids with words and beat tracks. Clearly, we can express all of these kinds of ideas and feelings with instrumentation alone. And what I'm so excited about is to dive into using Hyperscore in partnership with the collaborative songwriting that we're already doing in the coming season, so that my singers can have a much more complete experience of their expression. Kind of like from start to finish, they really wrote the whole piece together. So that's what really excites me about composing with kids. I could go on and on. That's what I'm really excited about in terms of, incorporating Hyperscore into the work that I'm doing. And I would say the biggest key for me and for our team at Sister Cities has been kind of stepping back and giving ourselves also as the adults the permission to also be a composer, the permission to co-create, and with the right tools, your students will also see themselves that way. And that creates an incredible community that makes a difference for everybody. And that's what we're all about, right? So that's what I wanted to share with you. So thanks, June.
Oh my gosh, that is just so inspiring and wonderful. And that brings our presentation to conclusion. And we are open for questions. I think I saw a few already posted in the chat.
We had a few really good ones. So I'm just going to talk about pricing really, really quick. We get that out of the way, and then we'll move on to questions. For a limited time, Music First is offering Hyperscore for $199 per school per year. And that is an unlimited number of students. So it's a wonderful opportunity to get this in for the next school year. We are also offering free 30-day trials to Hyperscore. So you would be able to use that with your students basically through the end of the year. Kind of have a fun, how soon can we sign up? One of the questions. You can sign up right now. You just visit newharmonyline.org/musicfirst trial. You can also visit musicfirst.com. Under the software tab, select Hyperscore, and you'll be able to access a free trial there. Yes, if purchasing has not begun, do we have some time to get admin on board for next year? Absolutely. You have plenty of time to get that in. So we are happy to work with you, and we can set you up with the education manager in your territory. We had a couple of questions that I would love Peter to speak to. The first one is about homeschooling. I think this one is for Cece. Do we have versions of Hyperscore for homeschool specific curricula, homeschool specific lesson plans? How would you imagine using this in a homeschool environment?
Well, I can see that the resources for educators page that we've created has all our tip tools and my modules on it. And so basically, I know as it's tech savvy as my students are, that a lot of them would be able to either teach themselves, or you would have an opportunity to look through the materials, or whoever's heading the homeschooling will have the opportunity to look through the materials and teach it absolutely no problem. If there's something missing or you have a question, you email me, I'll answer the question, and you're off and running. But I often find that just giving the kids the opportunity to have a day where they just mess around with it, they figure out everything before, as Kevin was saying, they figure it out before I even tell them what to do. So you might find that some time to experiment is even just as important before labeling things. But yes, our resources for educators page is for everyone. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, great question. The next question I'm very excited to have Peter speak to. One of our attendees is asking, curious if and how the program exports to traditional notation software. like note flight or flat, I'm immediately thinking about our young kids composing with Hyperscore and then having our older ensembles be able to perform these kids' pieces. We're a K through 12 school, so that cross-divisional collaboration could be profound.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We love incorporating performance as much as possible into Hyperscore projects, into a Hyperscore education. It can be at the end of a segment or at the end of the year, having an orchestra come in, or the older students that are in orchestra perform kids pieces. I think that's wonderful. It's something we do quite a lot. Hyperscore can connect to MIDI devices, and it can export MIDI files that can be imported into standard music notation editing programs. So it just opens up and you have your notation right there that you can then print out and create parts from. Sometimes in Hyperscore, you can create something that's not playable on a particular instrument. So you might want to go through and just like look at that, or have your students discover that they can't play a certain note on their instrument. But yeah, it's definitely something that's in there, and we're always thinking about new ways of incorporating new features, including standard music notation, actually into Hyperscore itself as well.
I'll mention that young kids can write very complex music that will challenge even professional ensembles, and it's a great way to involve like professional music organizations or adult, ensembles with your schools and with the kids' compositions.
Great, thank you so much. If we don't have any other questions at this point, we're gonna close out the webinar. I wanted to thank the Hyperscore team. We're getting some great feedback from the chat. The program looks amazing. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your Tuesday night to spend some time with us, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you to the Hyperscore teams, and we will see you all later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.